Hi, friends. In our time together today, I want us to talk about note transitions. The transition from one note to another can be a challenge that we experience in a lot of tunes. It might be a run, it might be punching a note, it might be an octave jump, it might be one of those really high notes. There are a lot of situations that can become a little awkward for us in playing, and I want to think through just a couple of options how to handle these. I don't want to give you every option under the sun. I'm just going to list, I think, 3 awkward situations you'll probably experience and some thoughts on that. There's a lot you could do with note transitions. We've already talked about those octave jumps in another video. But in this one, I just want to share a few other things to really get us thinking more and more about what we can do as we play our whistles and to make ourselves better musicians based on the skills we have. And so that leads into my very first recommendation. Based on the skills we have, develop your skills. I'm working on developing my skills. This is one of the reasons I provide scale skill exercises. It's so important for us to develop our dexterity in our playing. And I'm actually using my Wild Irish High D as the example today rather than one of my low D whistles, just because sometimes it's a little easier to hear that on the high, or at least I thought so today, and it's what I felt like doing. So devote the time to becoming a better musician. This is why I even give some of these recommendations as I'm introducing a tune. I might say, well, this area could be a challenge and this is how you work on it. One of the things I often say is slow it down, run that phrase again and again and again. But that doesn't mean you're always going to be in a situation where you're going to immediately develop the skills to be successful with awkward note transitions. So here are a few examples and things you could do. We just learned John Ryan's polka recently, and I want to turn back to that as for a couple of our examples. Opening into John Ryan's polka, here's one example. You might have a note that if you punch it, it's going to sound, you're going to think it sounds funny, or it might squeak and squawk. For example, the start of John Ryan's polka, if you punch those first 2 notes, well, see, you've got to figure out your whistle, your breath pressure. I didn't intend to squeak on that first note. It just happened. So what works? But you might find that if you dial it back so there's no risk of squeaking, that it's too gentle. So do something else, like throw an ornament. If you remember when I introduced the tune, I started that off with a crayon rather than a punch. That worked well for me. You could start on another note. Like I did this to listen to see what note sounded the best. I think if you could jump into that from a C sharp, you could simply play, See? All kinds of things you could do there to deal with a note that's going to want to squeak at you. So you could ease into it, or you could put a roll or a crayon or some other ornament, or you could just play another note, walking into it, and that will help. Let's see, my next example. Oh, runs. Ha 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 ha. Staying in John Ryan's polka. After that entry note, I'm going to do the C sharp to the D. See, that works well, doesn't it? You then have to play. And when I introduced the tune, I said, sit down, be patient. And just do that until your fingers become used to it. Again, another good reason for scale exercises, because it helps introduce kind of such jumps. Here are a couple of things you could do on that run. Let's say that you're trying to play that fast and you can't. Well, leave a note out. So, see, I just took the C sharp out and I made it a, and you could then ornament. Or, see, problem solved. But don't give up trying. The other thing you could do, a run is often a challenge because it leaves notes out. So rather than leaving a note out, another solution is, well, just do the whole run. Put the C sharp back in on the downward, and or just throw some ornaments in. And if you're playing with other people, then happily leave notes out. But I like the idea of drop a note, ornament, or just make it a pure run, and your fingers will be more relaxed with it. And so that should work for you. And one other example, we recently learned the Boys of Blue Hill, and these are quicker dance tunes, and this is a challenge. These challenges or note transitions exist in fast tunes, slow tunes. So in the B part of the Boys of Blue Hill, you've got to go. So a couple of things. There's one of those awkward note jumps. You're going A, F sharp, D. Notice when I did that, I actually went A, F sharp, E, D. See, if you're having a hard time, add a note in or leave one out. Better yet, work on it till you get it. But I don't mean, you still need to be able to play it, right? So as you're going into that, then the real challenge here is you get to that. You might have a hard time getting up into those high notes. Sometimes if you're doing a quick run, a run upward is easier than a jump to a high note. You've got some tunes where you have to go like F sharp and just straight up to that B. If you have to do that, and that's a challenge, or C sharp, or even a D, or an A, some of those higher notes, run up to it. I know the Boys of Blue Hill goes. You could. See, I just did a little finger roll there. That works. Everybody thinks you did it on purpose. Shh, don't tell them. Another thing is to start on like the note below and do a quick slide. That works well. Or a slower slide. You could do that. And sometimes you could even replace it with another note. If you can't play like that highest note, find a note that's in harmony with that and play that one. So you've got a lot of options, especially if if you find a tune and you have to play a high note. Try hitting it like with a hard tongue, or slide up to it, or do a quick run to it. So those are all things you can do. I want today, in this time, to talk about note transitions, just to give you some ideas. Ultimately, sure, we want to be able to play every note cleanly, but, honestly, that's not the reality, is it? The reality is that I stumble. You might stumble. The reality is that some notes are harder for me to play on my whistles. And sometimes if I've got a tune that requires me, another option, if I have a tune that requires me to play notes that are harder for me to play on one of my whistles, I'll choose a whistle that's not as hard. And I have whistles that, like John Ryan's polka, that if I punch it, they squeak. So I'll use one that doesn't. So that works well there too. Ultimately, we want to practice and practice to become better musicians. But a good musician also knows how to fudge something as it goes. You can make it work and use an ornament, use a slide, step into something, leave a note out, add a note in, change a note. You've done it on purpose, and everybody will think, well, that was really clever. It is clever. Find ways to play the tunes so you don't frustrate and exasperate yourself, and you could still be successful. We'll continue growing, but in the meantime, work with the skills you have today. And if you've got a challenging note transition, find a way around it so that you're not feeling stumbly and awkward and frustrated. So I hope these are a couple of good ideas for you, my friends. Until next time, this is Scott Shade. Happy whistling.